Hey everyone, welcome back to another Control video. Been a while, but we've been getting a ton of questions about how the product actually works. We're here with Paul, some crazy coronavirus times, where we're going to try and hop in, really explain what the product does, how the technology works in more detail, and of course, talk about what makes Kontrol become that $100 million a year in revenue company that we all want it to be. First things first, Paul, how are you and how are you dealing with COVID?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Staying inside. It's nice being able to work from home.
Well, we've been busy. So during the COVID crisis, we're an essential service provider, which means we've been open up the whole way through. So from an energy and an emission perspective, we never shut down, which has been pretty good for business. But of course, the times have been challenging, and we recognize that. Things are actually getting busier now that I think we're in phase 2 in Ontario of opening up. So now we're seeing industrial plants that were shut for a few months come back online. So I would say things are pretty good.
Awesome. Oh, it's great you guys are staying busy, and I'm sure for some building owners that this is the perfect time to kind of look at new opportunities and things to do when they're not as busy.
What's happened during COVID is everyone's trying to find out what the new normal is. So I think I would say for about 2 months, most buildings and plants have been shut down. About half our revenue doesn't require us to go to customer sites, and about the other half requires us to go install something and run a project. So from that perspective, we've been busy, but of course, if a customer building or plant is shut down, we can't go to site. As things open up now, the kind of requests we're getting are, okay, there's the base service that you provide, what do we need to do for COVID? So for us, it's actually becoming another revenue opportunity, another talking point, another point of contact with our customer, for sure.
Well, I guess let's go into kind of what these customers are getting. For people that see Kontrol as this magic technology, let's really take it a couple layers deeper. Let's talk about the product. We've talked about why did Beyond Meat choose you, or why is Toyota choose you, and let's start off by talking about the pain points that these customers had, and then the solution you guys gave them. But really, let's try and go into detail about how the technology itself works.
Sure. So I'd love to share my screen if I could and give you like a few slides, and
Sure.
that help. All right. I think to understand what's happening in our industry, you have to really think about how people use technology today and their iPhones. Everything's digital. But if you think about the building market is still very much analog and catching up. So in the first case, let's share how we make money. And so there's basically 3 revenue streams that Kontrol. There's a project stream, a recurring service, and a recurring software. From a revenue perspective, how Kontrol makes money is every building is a customer. So I think it's a pretty simple business, and hopefully we'll communicate that today. And every building as a customer has essentially 3 sources of revenue for us: a project, a recurring software, and a recurring service. And if you think about buildings, what we're basically doing is moving them from analog old technology into digital new technology. And we have a chart later in this short presentation which shows what happens over time to Kontrol's revenues as we bring on buildings. So again, very simple business proposition. We're making buildings smarter and better in real time, and we're doing that through project revenue, recurring revenue on software, and service. So from a technology point of view, we have a patented technology which we're very excited about because it's highly scalable, and we've seen this now in our customer base as we accelerate. So for example, Toyota would be part of a new customer acquisition. So what the technology is a gateway which can basically speak with any type of building automation system that exists. So if you think about a building that's been built over 40 years, they've got some kind of analog technology in the building with some communication ability. We can go in very quickly, efficiently with our technology, install our gateway, and within about 3 days, 2 or 3 days, we'll know more about the building than the building owner does. So it's very fast, very efficient, very effective, open protocol, and allows us to communicate with the building. We then move all that data into the cloud. We analyze it. So we're now analyzing 30 billion data records, which is pretty big and getting bigger. And in those data records, we find out how the building operates and what needs to be improved. Now, if you bring us, let's say, 10 new buildings as a customer, well, we're already analyzing over 150, which means even though you have a large portfolio that might be worth $1 billion, you won't have as much information as we do spread out across all the buildings that we're looking at. So we use that data, those analytics, to help you as a customer. So there's really nothing we haven't seen in a building. And so now SmartMax is our gateway, moves it into the cloud, which is Smart Site, which is where all the analytics are done. And we send it back to the customer in our user interface that they customize. So whatever is important for them to want to see, whether it's energy consumption or how the HVAC system is running or how the building's being cooled or the total amount of energy, those are all the analytics that we give back to the customer. So once we're installed, we're very sticky. And that installation revenue drives other project revenues and service revenues over time. And the technology is patented. And so it allows us to really, when we're bringing on new customers, allows us to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. So it is a competitive marketplace, but you can see how we stand out from the crowd. So this is an example of why did Toyota choose Kontrol. And there's a number of factors, but basically we were able to outcompete, very large competitors because we were able to do this at a lower price point, very efficient. We're not running any wires, so this is all Wi-Fi, IoT, Bluetooth, and it allows us to get into any facility, building, or plant very quickly. We have a great gross margin, and then we're very sticky once we're producing all the data. So once we're in a building, our loss ratio is less than 1%. You typically only lose a customer if they're selling their building or they're moving. But other than that, we have a very sticky business, which I think is good for Kontrol investors from the perspective of longevity and long term. Now, what's really interesting in our business model is people always say, well, how are you going to scale? And for us, it's very simple. Every building is a customer. The more buildings we add, the more money we make. So if we're at 150 buildings or 100 buildings, you can see what the revenue is. There's project revenue, there's recurring software and service revenue, and call that around 15 million. When you're in 1,000 buildings, you can see what happens to the revenue. You start to look at that $100 million mark. So we're in what I would say a focused business where we're trying to bring customers on, which are buildings. Now, those buildings are managed or owned or operated by various groups. But ultimately, the more buildings we bring on, the more money we make, and the more Kontrol is worth in terms of value. So I think it's a pretty simple value proposition driven by high organic growth and strategic acquisitions. So as an example, if you can add 100 buildings in terms of footprint with an acquisition and it's strategic, you should look at it, which is what we do.
So let's take a couple steps back. I think this was awesome. Really going into these details on the slides is great. Go back 2 slides to where you kind of have it linking, and so this is where I think I have some questions, and as well other people have some questions. So first off, cool, awesome slide. So let's talk about this slide in a little bit more detail, because this is where I think people get a little bit confused about really what Kontrol does. So on the left we've got electrical, natural gas, HVAC, etc. So really talk me through, so you guys are analyzing all of the current, I guess, energy usages of a building, right? So that goes into your system, and then what happens? So now the building owner sees what, and why is that important to them?
Okay, so if you think about it from a utility perspective, and I think this will help the viewers understand. So 90% of a building's utility consumption is the HVAC system, so the heating, cooling, air conditioning, ventilation, and water. Okay, so if you're going to influence a building and you're going to see how a building operates, you have to look at 90% of the footprint. The other is really incidental electrical usage, energy usage. So of that 90%, we analyze that in real time with our hardware and our software. Okay, so that analysis drives what should be happening in the building. So what we say to the building owner is, your building looks like it's about 15 to 20% below or above in terms of energy consumption, where a comparable building should be. You're really running a poor building. Your operating costs are way too high. Your energy costs are way too high. Here's what you now need to do. Here's a series of steps that you need to take. You can't do those steps practically without having all the data and the analytics in real time. And so we're running in 15-second intervals. And that's why I say we know more about the building in a few days than the building owner, because of those deep analytics. So then we apply our smart learning algorithms. Some people call that AI. For now, we call it smart learning. And we start to see the patterns in the building. So for example, your set points may be off in your heating and cooling. You may be running too aggressive on your boilers. And our smart learning software goes in and evaluates what are the ideal and optimal conditions. And then what the fix is the project. So you may need an improved boiler system. You may need a new building automation system. You may need more controls in the building that you don't have. And we're going to supply those to you. So from our perspective, what's proprietary is our hardware and our software. And some of the other services that we provide, we do it on an integration or project basis, but all wrapped in our software and our hardware.
Interesting. So I guess to give an insight, at least my understanding. So you go in, you guys obviously implement this tech, you get a bunch of information back. Let's say that the building comes back and you guys realize, hey, look, you're heating too much water between these times and these times. You could save a bunch of money by doing this instead. So it gives them, real time, I guess, understanding of where their energy usage is. And then you guys say, hey, look, we can help you take this to the next step if you'd like, or whatever it is, while also, of course, charging them for the system that you guys implemented.
Right. So I think, in our view, you can't make a change if you don't understand what's happening right now. So there's different, the analog way, if we want to use that example, is to manage the building over a year, get all your utility bills, hire an engineering firm, have them spend 3 months writing a report. So 15 months later, you've got information on your building. We're going in, installing our technology, and within 2 days, we're pumping data into the cloud, analyzing the building and saying, here's what's going on in your building. So you think about that from a factory perspective, what excited Toyota about what Kontrol could do is, without running any wires, and factories can be like 300,000 or 400,000 square feet. So without running any wires, we can install our technology, start communicating with equipment, start communicating with utilities almost overnight, and start reporting that data and analytics to the customer. Then we decide what we want to do with that. But once we're installed, the key to our business, once we're installed, people don't get rid of us. And we grow with that customer over time because of the value of the data. And now we don't sell data directly, and I think that's important because of all the rules around that. But the data that we have, we're able to monetize by getting new customers, right? So if you say to me, again, I've got 20 buildings and I'm an important customer and I'm worth $1 billion in asset value, well, I'm analyzing 150. I'm going to know more than you. And so as we add more buildings and more customers, that data becomes even more valuable. And it's the ability to get it to the customer quickly, efficiently, at a great price point where we're making money. And then that drives a whole range of other revenue and services that we can provide over time.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Like you guys said, you're very sticky, which is fantastic. Recurring revenue is key. And so you're able to, of course, provide all this information to building owners that, like you said, might have 10 buildings, you name it, and give them the insight that, hey, these other buildings, this is how they're benefiting, this is what's happening with them, you guys could be doing this better, X, Y, Z, which I think is fantastic. And comparing it to the amount of buildings out there, there's a ton of buildings. I think Kontrol to get to 1,000 buildings is not that crazy, right? At least in my eyes.
Let me give you an example, because I think investors often miss this about us, right? So Honeywell is a competitor. They're a global competitor. We're kind of the small cap insurgent, taking on the big giants. Honeywell's got 50 billion of revenue, right? And 150 billion market cap. This is a huge market. We're not the only player in this space. It's a massive market. It's dominated by mega caps, but there's lots of rooms for small caps to run from 15 million of revenue to 100 million, lots of room. And that's what we're doing. So we started this at $1 million of revenue. I think last year we finished about 14.6. We're really at the early stages of where we're going. And so if you want to think about the industry and how rich it is, just look at the mega caps out there. And Honeywell got to 50 billion in our sector, which means there's lots of room for small caps to grow. And I think, investors in our space really miss that. And that's really critical, because 1,000 buildings is not insurmountable as a goal. We're at about 150. If we get to 1,000, you can see that path to 100 million of revenue, and that's what really has us excited.
Well, and talk to me about the kind of acceleration. I imagine getting the first 10 buildings was the hardest part. Now that you have 150, getting new ones is getting easier and easier as you guys have more and more, data to show for it, correct?
Absolutely. So think of our next acquisition, which we're going to talk about, has 100 buildings. So the owner operator is managing 100 buildings. Now, he's not doing everything that we're doing. It's a sliver of what we're doing. But the idea is if we can scale into 100 buildings because we're picking up one part of the service chain and we can add our services to that, that's going to really accelerate our business. So in picking up that acquisition, we get to 250. Now you can start to really see, okay, Kontrol's got a shot here at 1,000 buildings. And at 1,000 buildings, you're a dominant player in this sector. You're making noise, you're getting the attention of the mega caps. And, we want to prove that we can do that. So yes, the first 10, 20, 30, 40 buildings are the hardest, but now there's some scale to what we're doing and an acceleration of that scale.